In Hebrews 13, verse 4, it says, marriage is honorable among all, and the bed undefiled, but fornicators and adulterers God will judge. It's telling us that there is an appropriate and good and right relationship which God ordains, that God himself established between a man and a woman. And there are those things that are inappropriate, that are sinful, that are a violation of his will. But it says that marriage is honorable and the bed undefiled. We want to consider that and think about how that picture is painted for us in the Song of Solomon. It's not a book that we study very often and maybe even avoid. I know there are preachers who avoid it, kind of like the plague. It's a challenging book. But the Song of Solomon, or as it is sometimes described, the Song of Songs, as the New King James says here, the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's in Song of Solomon 1 verse 1, it's a beautiful picture of true love as God intended it. You think about that Adam and Eve were created by the hand of God. They were placed in the garden paradise. Both the man and his wife were absolutely pure and innocent. And God brought them together and joined them in that first great institution of the home. That was the perfect marriage. There has never been a marriage as perfect as that one with Adam and Eve in the garden before sin entered. But it was perfect. And so as we think about that, you get to the book of the Song of Solomon, a book of poetry. It's included in what we consider to be wisdom literature, written in a poetic form, where it talks about Solomon, or often described the beloved, and then the Shulamite woman, the young woman who is here, presented in the book, that they represent a godly courtship and marriage in a world that's full of sin. In other words, can we have what Adam and Eve had? A good and pure marriage. When you read the Song of Solomon, you see that there is a respect and an admiration that the beloved Solomon and the Shulamite have for one another. We see where sexual intimacy is saved for marriage. You see where there are difficulties and differences that are overcome, and there's a renewed passion in their relationship. Now, reservations about understanding the book in its literal meaning should not be any more difficult for us than understanding that Samuel hacked Agag to pieces, or David beheaded Goliath, because if you recall, if you've read the Song of Solomon, it's quite abundantly clear about things that are referred to in the book. And it used to be that in times past, to get away from the obvious meaning of what's being talked about, people said, well, it's an allegory. It's actually not talking about what you think it's talking about. Because surely God's word wouldn't contain things like that. Well, God's word contains things that are of a different nature. As we said, hacking of Agag to pieces and David beheading Goliath. And the moral challenges are our problem, they're not God's. The sexual content in the Song of Songs should no more lead us into immorality than the violent actions that we read about in the Bible should lead us to commit murder. It just is. It's what God has revealed to us. And for the Song of Songs he reveals it to us in a way that is very appropriate and wholesome about a relationship that God has ordained. And we understand there is figurative language here, and there are desires and activities that are discussed, but they're not conveyed in a vulgar way. They're tastefully shrouded in imagery that directly but delicately communicates the most intimate and passionate thoughts and actions of two people who are in love. It gives us more insight into what the Bible talks about with reference to a man knowing his wife. And it's fine, and those who are mature can handle reading this, contemplating it, considering it within its appropriate context that God has given to us. We have to take caution on interpreting things in the book because it is figurative, poetic language. There are some things that we can see and make an obvious application. There are other things that we can't press too far and we cannot insist upon, if you will. But as we look at this book, we think about it, if we dismiss it in saying it's just an allegory, we will miss the deep and rich teaching about courtship and marriage that the Lord presents to us. Overall, I would like for you to think of it in this way, as we referenced a moment ago in Genesis chapter 2, 18 to 25. Think of the Song of Solomon as a poetic representation or description of Adam and Eve as husband and wife in the garden before sin came into the world. Think about that perfect union as God originally intended it, and how that man can still enjoy a godly union with his wife, fully and completely as God intended it to be. Before we get into the details of the text, and this really is just going to be a summary, we're just going to hit highlights and we're going to delicately go through it. Let's think about this overall outline of the book. And I got this out of the Truth for Today commentary, and it breaks it down into three basic sections. The first section from chapter 1, verse 1, down through chapter 3, verse 5, is the idea of courtship that they have with one another, the dating, if you will. And then from chapter 3, verse 6, down through chapter 5, verse 1, is the marriage and honeymoon, and things being discussed there. And in the latter part of the book, from chapter 5, verse 2 to the end of chapter 8, is the idea of post-honeymoon and some difficulties that arise and those being worked through, and how that relationship ends up even stronger after that. So let's look here in Song of Solomon, chapter 1, and notice first of all in verse 2. And this is, and you'll have some little subtitles probably in your translation, and these are generally considered to be accurate. But it's the Shulamite, it's the young maiden, the young woman who is speaking here in chapter 1, verse 2. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. And again, this is poetic language, but let's understand what she is saying here. She's saying there is a powerful physical attraction, and she wants to be close to him. It's the idea of looking forward to and longing for that physical contact, and how it is refreshing and it is energizing. In verse 3, she talks about this fragrance, the ointments. You know how ladies put on perfume and men put on cologne these days sometimes because they want to be attractive not just in sight, but even in smell to one that they are attracted to. That's the idea that's being put forward before us there. So we see that things have not changed a whole lot in thousands of years. In verse 4, as it wraps up that first little statement from the Shulamite, draw me away, then it says the daughters of Jerusalem respond, we will run after you. So these are her friends who are speaking and responding to her calling out. Then it says the Shulamite says, the king has brought me into his chambers. Now the king, referring to Solomon, he is king at this time. But when it says brought me into his chambers, the NIV has a slightly different translation, which says, let the king bring me into his chambers. In other words, it's not something that has happened, but something she's anticipating in the future as she's looking forward to being his wife. Well, in verse 7, if you jump down there, or rather verse 5, she brings up the fact that she is concerned about the way that she looks. A female concerned about her appearance, and is this really attractive to him? I'm not sure I'm that attractive. So she has anxiety. When she says, I am dark but lovely. O daughters of Jerusalem, let the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon, do not look upon me because I am dark, because the sun has tanned me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me the keeper of vineyards, but my own vineyard I have not kept. And here's just the idea. She's uneasy about her looks and her appearance. She's dark in complexion. And what that's telling us there in this reference to the idea of the vineyards, that she's out like a common laborer in the vineyards. And it helps us to understand as well that there is an economic difference. You know, Solomon is a very wealthy and rich king. But she is a poorer woman that doesn't have the servants doing the field work. She and her brothers have to go out and do the field work. And so she's dark complected. So she's concerned, is that an issue? She's worried about that. Well, in verse 7, it says, tell me, and this is her speaking to her beloved, tell me, O you whom I love, where you feed your flock, where you make it rest at noon. For why should I be as one who veils herself by the flocks of your companions? And again, poetic language, sometimes we might scratch our head. What exactly is she talking about? It's just simply the idea that she's concerned that Solomon may seek favor from others, that he may seek others. She's asking, where do you feed your flock? Where are you going? What are you doing? Are you pursuing others? Are you looking for others? Now notice how he responds in verse 9. This is the beloved. He begins talking in verse 8 and verse 9 is where we want to pick up. Song of Solomon 1 verse 9. I have compared you, my love, to my filly among Pharaoh's chariots. Your cheeks are lovely with ornaments, your neck with chains of gold. Now again, there may not be a lot of women today who want to be compared to a horse, but his words are a compliment. You are beautiful. You are attractive. You catch my eye. No, there's not anybody else I'm looking after. There's no one else I'm pursuing. You are the one. And you are lovely to me. Your cheeks are lovely with ornaments. And so your neck with gold chains. So he is sensitive to her insecurities. No, you are beautiful to me. And that's all that matters. So then they go on with compliments and kindness. If you drop down to verses 15 into chapter 2, the beginning there. In verse 15, again, he says to her, behold your affair, my love, behold your affair. You have dove's eyes. Your eyes are attractive to me. They catch my attention. She says in verse 16, behold, you're handsome, my beloved. Yes, pleasant. So they're exchanging these compliments as two young people in love would do and letting each other know, I find you attractive, I find you beautiful, I find you handsome. She says then in chapter 2, verse 1, I am the rose of Sharon and the lily of the valleys. And what she's saying there is, I'm a common flower. I'm a flower among other flowers. I'm just mixed in with all of them. But notice what he says. Like a lily among thorns, so is my love among the daughters. No, you're not just a flower that disappears amongst all the other flowers. When I see you, I see a flower among a bunch of thorns. You stand out to me. And so again, those compliments those kind words that they exchange with one another. That is a sweetness of the love of youth here. And they have this great longing for one another, to be husband and wife with each other. In chapter 2, verse 4, it says, "He brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love. Sustain me with cakes and raisins, refresh me with apples, for I am lovesick." She's concerned with who she is in society, her standing in society. She works out in the fields. Here's this great king. Is he thinking about others? Am I good enough for him? And it says he's brought me into the banqueting house. And that's the idea, is publicly he has shown I'm his love interest. He's brought me into the banqueting house. There are others there. He has made it very clear to everyone, I am his love interest. And so she's overwhelmed with that experience. She's excited and encouraged by that experience. She longs for his embrace. But notice verse 7. Verse 7. "I charge you," this is the Shulamite woman speaking, the young maiden, "I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or by the does of the field, do not stir up nor awaken love until it pleases." Don't force love before it's time. Don't hurry up. Don't press it. Let things unfold. And don't give in to desires before it's proper. There's a proper place. There's a proper time. And she's saying, it's not yet. And the daughters of Jerusalem, you encourage me in that. Help me to stay the course. Well, you keep on going down and you see them exchanging these things, talking to one another. It's mostly her who's speaking through this. But I want you to notice chapter 2, verse 15. As she is longing for Solomon, as she wants to be his wife, it says that her brothers speak up. Chapter 2, verse 15, "Catch us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes." Well, those little foxes can be pesky in the vineyard, and spoiling the vines, going in and ruining them. And here's the idea. There are little invasive thoughts that a man or a woman could have, and here particularly they're speaking to their sister. There are little invasive thoughts that can just ruin things. If you just let that go, and it runs wild in your mind, and you just spin over it again and again, and you let things go unfettered, it can ruin your relationship. Don't let it happen. Catch those little foxes, bind them up. Don't let them run wild. So keep a lid on your anxieties is how we might say it. Keep those things pinned down. Don't let that happen. You get down to chapter 3, and we see where she continues to struggle with anxiety. This is the idea of a dream that she has. In chapter 3, verse 1, says, "By night on my bed I sought the one I love. I sought him, but I did not find him. I will arise now, I said, and go about the city, in the streets and in the squares. I will seek the one I love. I sought him, but I did not find him. The watchmen who go about the city found me. I said, have you seen the one I love?" Now, in chapter 3, verse 5 beginning is where we begin to read about the wedding and the honeymoon. This is the anticipation, the anxiety leading up to that wedding. And she says, I had this dream, and in this dream, I was seeking for him, but he was nowhere to be found. Are we really going to get married? Is this really going to happen? I'm scared I'm going to lose him before we're together as husband and wife. She went out to look to find him, but couldn't find him anywhere. But then verse 4, scarcely had I passed by them when I found the one I love. I held him and would not let him go until I had brought him to the house of my mother and into the chamber of her who conceived me. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or by the does of the field, do not stir up nor awaken love until it pleases. She says in her dream, she sought him, didn't find him. Have I lost him? Oh, but then she found him. And then they are husband and wife together. But then she says, with this charge of sobriety to the daughters of Jerusalem. Again, don't stir up. Don't awaken love before it's time. Don't let the passions get away from you. That's what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to being his wife. But let's keep things in check here before that time arrives. In chapter 3, verse 6, then, we read about this, the grand wedding procession. It says, who is coming out of the wilderness like pillars of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all the merchants' fragrant powders. Behold, it is Solomon's couch with 60 valiant men around it, of the valiant of Israel. They all hold swords, being expert in war. Every man has a sword at his thigh because of fear in the night. So Solomon, this is the idea. He's coming in for the wedding procession. He's being brought in. He's being brought in on this, verse 9, palanquin, if I'm saying that correctly. Basically, it's just a special chair that they made for him to carry him on in. He's coming in a regal fashion as this great king with his bodyguards all around him, all the royal pomp and circumstance, this public celebration and the society rejoicing that the king is getting married. Now, from what we know about Solomon later in his life, he was not such an honorable man. This is the idea. He's in his youth, and this is his true love here that's being presented. And this is a great occasion for celebration for Israel as the king is getting married. And so you have this great wedding procession that comes in verse 11. It speaks of the fact, go forth, O daughters of Zion, and see King Solomon with the crown with which his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding, the day of the gladness of his heart. So he's overfilled with joy. In chapter 4, then, in verses 1 through 7, it talks about the fact that now as husband and wife, he knows her and he knows her fully. He knows the full beauty of her body because it is after the wedding and they have come together as husband and wife. And there's this invitation then to go away on the honeymoon, and she prepares that. If you look in verse 8, chapter 4, verse 8, come with me from Lebanon, my spouse. So now it's husband and wife. You are my spouse. They're married together, talking about the honeymoon, and she prepares for that honeymoon. It's very intoxicating. It's very sweet to them. In verse 12, I want you to notice something. It says, a garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse, a spring shut up, a fountain sealed. And what it's talking about in those passages down through verse 15 is the fact she was a virgin. She was walled up. She was closed off. She was pure. And now I have come into her as my wife. Verse 16, awaken, O north wind, and come, O south. Blow up my garden that its spices may flow out. Let my beloved come to his garden and eat its pleasant fruits. So where love was told, don't awaken yet, now love's being told, awaken. Why? Because they're husband and wife. It's appropriate, it's proper, it's good, it's wholesome. And so it is that they are husband and wife together. But as they have this headiness, if you will, of the honeymoon and the sweetness of the newness of this relationship, well, things don't continue in the smoothness of that relationship. In chapter 5, verse 2, notice that she has another dream. It says, I sleep, but my heart is awake. It is the voice of my beloved. He knocks, saying, open for me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one. For my head is covered with dew, my locks with the drops of the night. I have taken off my robe. How can I put it on again? I have washed my feet. How can I defile them? My beloved put his hand by the latch of the door, and my heart yearned for him. I rose to open for my beloved, and my hands dripped with myrrh. My fingers with liquid myrrh on the handles of the lock. I opened for my beloved, but my beloved had turned and gone away and was gone. My heart leaped up when he spoke. I sought him, but I could not find him. I called him, but he gave me no answer. So she's painting the picture here there's some type of disagreement. There's some kind of distance and friction between them. He came to her, but she said, no. I don't want to be around you now. But when she had that thought, that idea, she jumped up to open the door because she regretted turning him away, rebuffing him. She opens the door and he's gone. And now she's panicked. What have I done? Whatever friction, whatever difficulty was there in her being closed off to him, she realizes she had made a mistake there. And now she's longing for him and looking for him. Talks about her going out into the city looking for him and the watchmen who are there who strike her. And she says in verse 8, I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, that you tell him I am lovesick. She's saying, I need to get a message to him that I still love him and I am passionate about him. I don't want to lose him. And notice their response in verse 9. What is your beloved more than another beloved? Or fairest among women, what is your beloved more than any other beloved that you so charge us? What makes your man so special? That's the question that they are asking there. Well, she goes on to confess how wonderful she thinks he is. When she talks about in verse 10, my beloved is white and ruddy, chief among 10,000s. His head is the finest gold. His locks are wavy and black as a raven, and goes on to describe his physical form and features. She's saying, I'm still as attracted to him as ever. Well, in chapter 6 then, and beginning in verse 1 there, you see that her beloved is found. Where is your beloved gone, O fairest among women? Where is your beloved turned aside, that we may seek him with you? My beloved is gone to his garden, to the beds of spices, to feed his flock in the gardens and gather the lilies. I am my beloved, and my beloved is mine. He feeds his flock among the lilies. That idea of I am my beloved, and my beloved is mine, see, that anxiety is gone. That friction has been worked through. Those difficulties, those are all taken care of, and it's okay now. So they worked through whatever spat or problem, if you will, that they had. And he continues to have a great attraction and passion for her in chapter 6, verse 4, down through verse 10. He goes on in chapter 7 to talk about her unmatched beauty. From head to toe, he describes her. And you keep on going down in chapter 7, and she now is welcoming of his advances, to be with her, to be close to her. So it is in chapter 8, verse 6. The Shulamite says to her beloved, set me as a seal apart or upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm, for love is as strong as death. Jealousy is cruel as the grave. Its flames are flames of fire, a most vehement flame. Set me as a seal on your heart, seal on your arm. In other words, she's saying, our love is as strong as ever, and we are secure together. There's other things that are very powerful, but our love has overcome those things. In verse 7, many waters cannot quench love, nor can the floods drown it. If a man would give for love all the wealth of his house, it would be utterly despised. In other words, money doesn't mean anything when it comes to love. He loves her and she loves him, and everything else is irrelevant. It goes on in verse 8 then, as the brothers call to mind when their sister was a young girl, before she had matured. And they say in verse 9, chapter 8, verse 9, if she was a wall, we build upon her, a battlement of silver, and if she is a door, we enclose her with boards of cedar. In other words, we locked her up and we sealed her off. She was chaste as a young girl. and we did not let anything happen to her. So they helped to look out for her honor. She goes on to talk about, yes, I am a wall. Now I'm a mature woman. But she explains very plainly that she is now a mature woman in control of herself, of her passions, and of her desire. And she freely, intelligently gave herself to Solomon. This wasn't just a matter of unbridled passions that the two of them have come together as husband and wife, but it was a mature decision that she made. And so, chapter 8, verses 13 and 14, it says, you who dwell in the gardens, the companions, listen for your voice. Let me hear it. Make haste, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices. Again, we look at that and we think, what is it that they are talking about, the beloved and the Shulamite? What they're talking about is we're just so full of joy. We are just so happy. We're companions and we are passionate, and it continues on with them. Again, in very poetic language. But you can see in this book this great picture of the beauty and the bliss of love between a man and a woman. Let's open up to number 800. 800. And we can see in this that in spite of the world we live in today, it's not that much different than the world in which Solomon and the Shulamite lived. That we can have a relationship with another as God intended it to be. The attractions and desires are normal and natural. God made the woman for the man, and for them to come together as husband and wife, for them to be drawn to one another. You can see that patient anticipation of their union and the anxiousness both before marriage and the reconciliation with the strengthening of the marriage as they hit some bumps in the road, if you will. We can have that same thing today. In our marriages, or if we're anticipating marriage, we can have that. A man and woman can enjoy a healthy, robust, intimate life by following God's plan. There is no need for what the world would try to put upon us, the impurity and the immorality that's all around us that says that's where fulfillment is, that's where joy is. The Bible paints the picture for us in the Song of Solomon. No, it's right here between a man and his wife. You have discipline and you have commitment that governs your passions and desires. You can have a lifetime of joy and fulfillment without the scars of sin. And so let's determine that we are going to be people who honor that relationship that God has given to us as a great blessing. If we find that we haven't honored it, we haven't upheld it, we haven't respected it, let us repent. Let us be determined that we're going to be a husband who loves his wife as Christ loved the church. If you're a wife, be a wife who loves your husband and honors him and respects him. That's a great blessing. If there are other areas and other ways in your life that you have failed the Lord, that you realize, I need to make changes in my life, won't you do that today? If there's something you need to confess publicly, come and confess it. We'll pray with you. We'll pray for you. And you'll be an encouragement to us, and you'll bring joy to the angels in heaven. If you're not a child of God, but you recognize this morning, I need to obey the gospel. I need to submit my life to the Lord and follow his will so I can have that joy, whether it's in a marriage relationship or any other aspect of your life to recognize His way is the right way. His the way is the way of joy and peace and contentment. Then won't you be determined to do that this morning? Come and confess Jesus as the Christ. Submit in baptism because you determine I'm going to live for Him. I'm not going to live in sin any longer. And you can rise up to walk in the newness of life. So the invitation is extended to you. If you need to respond, please come forward while we stand and sing.